Hi everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Gio. I write stories about men falling in love with other men. That's what this is. I hope you enjoy. I'm calling this The Heart on the Apple Tree. I loved and hated my dad at the same time. It was a late October Friday here in Triple Falls, Montana, a few days before Halloween. It hadn't snowed much, only enough to dust the trees and then melt within a couple of hours. Though the nights were cold, the afternoon sun felt good. I stood a cut log end up on the old stump, made sure it didn't wobble, then hefted the axe, raised it overhead with both hands, and in one swing split the wood in half. One piece fell to the left, another to the right. I'm Cameron Jones, 5'10", mussed-up brown hair I had grown to my shoulders, and blue eyes. I'd been out here for an hour chopping wood. Shirtless, my shirt and wife-beater lay on the old picnic table under an even older apple tree. That tree had been ancient when I was born. Just under the lowest branch was a heart with initials. CJ loves GL. Cameron Jones loves Gabriel Lawrence. My first serious crush. My first boyfriend. The first guy I held hands with. The first guy I kissed. The first guy I literally talked all night with. The 3 happiest months of my life. We'd carved that back in high school, right before life went bad. It was next to another heart with initials, my dad and mom's. I chose the piece of wood that had fallen to the right of the old stump and set it up again. Chop. I sliced it in half, then took the pieces and stacked them under the lean-to with all the other wood. My dad would need a lot for the winter. Montana gets cold, especially in January, which is one of the reasons I go to college in Vegas. But not this week. I'd been back in Triple Falls since Wednesday, and I might be here another week. Usually, my dad chopped all the wood, but he couldn't. He'd had a heart attack 4 days ago, and I rushed back to Montana to watch over him and our house while he spent time at the hospital. My professors understood and had given me work to substitute for what I missed so I wouldn't fall behind. I got another log and set it up on the old stump. Holding the axe over my head, I brought it down on the log and split it, but I didn't hit it in the middle like I wanted. Standing the bigger piece up, I chopped again. I put those pieces on the firewood stack and walked to the apple tree. The heart had grown dark over the years. I traced my fingers across the heart and the initials. I had never loved someone like I loved Gabriel. Neither one of us had come out at the time. Nobody knew we were gay, or that we were secretly dating, or so we thought. Our last night together, we stood in the shadows of his porch, hugging. We kissed, held hands, told each other we'd love each other forever. And then his parents turned the lights on and walked out. His mom dragged Gabriel inside, screaming at him, while his dad pushed me off their property and told me never to come back. They contacted my dad and forbade Gabriel and me from ever seeing each other, ever calling each other, even texting each other. Dad agreed with them. It wasn't our first fight, but it was our worst. Somehow, word spread at school about Gabriel and I being gay and how our parents split us apart. Gabriel never came back to school. No matter what I tried, I hadn't heard from or seen Gabriel since. I suspect his parents shipped him out to a relative and took away his phone. It was my fault they took Gabriel away. They didn't want their son associating with a guy almost kicked out of school for fighting, vandalism, fighting, failing everything, fighting, sloughing, and did I mention fighting? Mom had left us 2 years earlier, and I couldn't stop being angry, except when Gabriel was around. He was the only person I could talk to about the pain inside me. That was over. His parents saw to that. Dad and I fought constantly over the strangest, stupidest things. I couldn't stop being angry with him, with the world, with life. That was the other reason I left for Vegas. I can't believe I'm back. I set up another log to chop. My grandmother's car pulled in the drive. "Cameron," Grandma yelled out the window. "Can you come help?" "Sure, Grandma," I yelled back. Covered in sawdust and sweat, I stuck the axe in the tree stump and jogged to the car. "Let me give you a hand, Dad." Dad was in the passenger seat, pale, hardly moving. "I'm not an invalid. I can do it," Dad said, slowly swinging his legs out. "Dennis, you are as stubborn as your dad. Cameron, help your dad get out of the car," Grandma said. I ran to the passenger side of the car. Dad tried to stand, but I gave him an arm to lean on, and he slowly rose. "Are you okay, Dad?" I said. Dad gave me one of his looks. "Do I look okay?" "Strong enough to chop wood. Don't know why I'm even bothering," I said. "Just take it slow, old man." He always hated when I called him that. It had started more than one fight. But right now, Dad didn't say a word. I got him into the house, made him sit in his favorite chair. The house was still as Mom had left it. The pink curtains she had found at some store, the floral wallpaper, the furniture she had picked out, everything in the house spoke of Mom. I placed the remote in Dad's hand and went back outside. "Dear, you don't need to take off work. Between Cameron and me, we've got Dennis inside," Grandma said into her phone. She opened the trunk and pointed at it. "Cameron's home? Are you sure that's a good idea?" A little voice came from the phone. "Grandpa." "Kids and their parents always fight about something, so don't get all uptight. Besides, Cameron spent 12 hours driving up here to check on his dad," Grandma said. Grandma and her phones. The way she used it, sometimes I thought old Alexander Graham must have invented the thing just for her. The trunk contained a single suitcase and a dozen sacks of groceries. I grabbed the suitcase. "I'll set it in his bedroom." Grandma only nodded. "I'm making them dinner," she said to her phone. Dad had turned the TV on to some football game, and I dumped the suitcase on his bed. I ran back, and to be nice, I asked Dad, "Do you need anything?" "No," Dad said, his eyes avoiding me. "I'm not starting a fight, don't you worry," I said, trying to make a friendly smile. "Unless you start it, old man." That got a hint of a grin. "Cameron," Grandma yelled, "come and help me with groceries." I ran back outside and helped bring the sacks in. "Where do you think your dad went?" Grandma said. I quickly checked the bathroom and his bedroom. Both were empty. I looked out the windows. Dad was by the old apple tree, staring at the axe, the wood I had chopped, at my shirts, and finally something on the tree. He took a seat at the picnic table and stared at his hands. "Dad's outside. I'll check on him," I said. "Some fresh air will do him good. I always said hospitals are sealed up too tight," Grandma said. "Take him a sweater or a blanket so he doesn't get a chill, and why don't you sit with your dad while I make some dinner? Nothing fancy, hamburgers and fries, and then we'll get him to bed." I took a blanket and walked out to the picnic table. After draping it around Dad, I asked, "Are you okay?" "I just want to sit here," Dad said, his eyes focusing on the tree. I'd never seen Dad act so lifeless before, or so pale. He hadn't shaved since the heart attack, and his hair could use a good comb. It was almost like he was his own ghost. "I'll chop you a little more wood," I said, and picked up a couple of logs. About 20 minutes later, Grandma brought out a couple of plates with burgers and fries and bottles of ketchup and mustard. "Dinner's ready. Cameron, with all the work you've done this afternoon, you must be starving. I made you 2 burgers, and there's more fries inside, and I made some cookies. Peanut butter chocolate chip," she said. "Thanks," I said, setting the axe down and taking the wood back to the lean-to. "Where's your plate?" "I can't stay. Your grandfather's waiting for me," she said. "I'll come by tomorrow. Can you handle things tonight?" I nodded and put my wife beater and shirt back on. "I'll call you if anything happens." Grandma stepped on her tiptoes and kissed my cheek. Then she bent over and kissed Dad and left. I took a seat opposite my dad and devoured a fry. Dad didn't say anything, so I poured a pile of ketchup for my fries and mustard on my burger and ate. "Can you forgive me?" Dad whispered. "What for?" I said, taking another bite. "I had too much time to think when I was in the hospital," he said. "Here you are, driving 12 hours to check on me and spending the last few days taking care of the place. Hell, you spent all day chopping wood." "You're not making any sense, old man," I said. "I feel like an old man," he said. He got up and walked over to the tree and traced the heart he had made for him and Mom decades ago. Then he traced the one Gabriel and I had made. "I made a mistake when you were in high school, one that drove my son away from me. I wish I could take it back. You don't know how I prayed for a second chance to make things right. And here you are." "We've had our rough times, but I'm your son, Dad," I said. "Who else is going to be here to help you?" His finger lightly followed the heart again, and then traced the letters, "CJ loves GL. I don't deserve it. Not after driving you and Gabriel apart." "Why did you do it?" I said. "Gabriel's parents didn't want their son associated with you. You are a bad influence on their son because he started swearing and fighting with them. He held a 4.0, and his grades started to slide. They were afraid he wouldn't get a good college because of it. They blamed all their problems on you." "Gabriel hated pleasing his parents and hated school. He felt trapped," I said. "The reasons all seemed perfectly logical at the time, but they seem stupid now," Dad said. "Sometimes a parent can make the wrong choice for the right reasons. I'm sorry." A minute passed and neither of us said anything. The sun was setting, so there was a little chill in the air. I made sure the blanket was snug about my dad. "Let's get you inside, Dad." I helped him walk into the living room, and I started a fire in the wood-burning stove to take the chill off the house. I set his food by him and a drink, and finished mine. "I'm sorry," Dad said. "After your mom left, I guess I wasn't much of a father." "It's okay, Dad," I said. He leaned over in his chair and looked at me, tears brimming in his eyes. "Thank you for driving up here. It means a lot. I love you, and I wish I had done a lot of things differently. I've made a lot of mistakes." "It's just the heart attack and medication making you think weird," I said. "The heart attack made me realize a lot of things. Promise me you'll find Gabriel and talk to him. It might not be too late for the two of you. And tell him I'm sorry, please, tonight," Dad said. "Dad, I won't leave you," I said. "Yes, you will. It's the only way I can make this right," Dad said. "I'll be fine. I'll sit in the chair, watch the game, and sleep." "I will in a minute," I said, and while I was cleaning up the dishes, Dad fell asleep. Taking a deep breath, I went back to the apple tree and stared at our little heart and its initials. CJ loves GL. Would Gabriel want to see me again? It's been 4 years, and it had ended the worst way possible. We had been best friends once, boyfriends later, and as close as two teens could get. We never got past kissing and holding hands. We were both stuck in the closet. No, it didn't end well, but it would be good to see him. I hopped in my old Ford truck and drove off. Even though I wasn't in this part of the world much, I still remembered how to get to Gabriel's place. It's been 4 years. He could have moved out. His parents might not let me see him. Would they call the police on me? I can't believe how nervous I was. After pulling up in front of their house, I wiped my palms on my jeans, looked in the mirror to make sure my hair was all right, and popped a breath mint. I should have gotten a different shirt. This one had sawdust on it. I brushed it off in a vain attempt to procrastinate. I can't believe I'm doing this. How had Gabriel changed? His parents wouldn't be happy to see me, but would Gabriel? Did he ever make it into college like his parents wanted? Did he find someone special? Their house was an older, yellow brick, one-story rambler with a porch with an old metal rocker. A window box, painted green with yellow trim, hung under the living room window. It was empty. The walk to their front door lasted years. I hopped up the 3 steps to their porch. Their screen door was closed, but the main door was open. I knocked 4 times. Somewhere in the back, some game show played. The host said, "So close, but it's not a car." I knocked again, louder. "Are you expecting anyone?" Mr. Lawrence said. "It's probably just the neighbors. I took them a plate of cookies yesterday, and they're probably bringing it back," Mrs. Lawrence yelled. I turned around to look at their yard. Scruffy lawn and overgrown shrubs. Gabriel had taken care of it back in high school. He never would have let it be like this. Mrs. Lawrence pushed open the screen door. "Can I help you?" "Mrs. Lawrence," I said, and turned around. "I'd like to see Gabriel. Would you get him?" Mrs. Lawrence looked the same as I remembered, tall, with salon-styled black hair streaked with gray, and wearing slacks and a long-sleeved blouse. "Cameron," she said, her hand covering her mouth. It trembled a little. "I'd heard you were in Vegas." "Dad had a heart attack," I said. "I'm back for a few days. May I come in and see Gabriel? I want to take him out for a night of beers and catch up." "Your father? How terrible. Is he all right?" she asked. "Grandma brought him home a little while ago, and he's sleeping," I said. "Is Gabriel home?" "You shouldn't be here. We only did. It's not. Oh dear." Mrs. Lawrence looked at her hands and sort of fidgeted. "Excuse me a moment." She walked back into the house and to the other room, and the game show host said, "For an extra 1,000, what's the next?" The TV shut off. "I was watching that," Mr. Lawrence said. "Cameron Jones is here," Mrs. Lawrence said. "What do I say?" "He has the nerve. Why?" "He wants to see Gabriel," Mrs. Lawrence said. "I don't know what to tell him. Come talk to him, please." I waited as they came outside, and I folded my arms. "Where's Gabriel?" "We never expected to see you again," Mrs. Lawrence said. "Be quiet and let me handle this," Mr. Lawrence said. "Cameron, I don't want any trouble. You should go." "I came to see an old friend," I said. "We're both over 21, so you don't have any say in our lives anymore." "So you can poison his mind against us?" Mr. Lawrence said. "What are you talking about?" I said. "We thought splitting the 2 of you would end your relationship," Mr. Lawrence said. "Tell him about the fight," Mrs. Lawrence said. "My sweet Gabriel never used to fight with us, not until he met you." "I told you to be quiet and let me handle this," Mr. Lawrence said. "It was a horrible fight," Mrs. Lawrence said. "Such language. We'd never taught him to say such things." "I said, let me handle this," Mr. Lawrence said. "What was the fight about?" I said. "You, college, grades, school, meddling in his life," Mr. Lawrence said. "You're bad news." "Can you believe it? He told us we were toxic parents and that we had destroyed his life," Mrs. Lawrence said. "We didn't. No offense, but you're not college material. We were only trying to protect his grades, and you would have destroyed any chance he had to go to college." "I'm in college," I said, "down in Vegas. I'm studying to be a physical therapist." "I told you to be quiet," Mr. Lawrence shouted at his wife, then shouted at me. "Good for you, Cameron. That doesn't change the fact that I don't want you talking to my son, ever." "Why don't you let him decide his own mind?" I said, and leaned forward to shout through the door. "Gabriel, you want some company?" "Stop that," Mrs. Lawrence said. "It's your fault he left." "Where did he go?" I said. "Because of you, he didn't want anything to do with us," Mr. Lawrence said. "He told us he'd be happier living out of his car than with us." "You wouldn't believe the language he used," Mrs. Lawrence said, fanning herself as she slightly blushed. "Good people don't use words like that. He used words they only use in those R-rated shows. He even called us toxic parents. I had to look that up on the internet to find out what it means. We're good people." "Where is Gabriel?" I said. "When we told him you had left for Vegas, he told us he never wanted to see us again. He arranged with his aunt to stay there, and then later moved in with some guys. We tried calling him, but he won't answer. The one time we did get a hold of him, he swore at me and hung up. He swore, I can't believe it, at his own mother. We went to see him for Christmas because he wouldn't come to us. We even took him presents, Mrs. Lawrence said, moaning. He didn't want to see us, so he went for a drive, Mr. Lawrence said. He never even opened his gifts. Cameron, my baby boy doesn't want anything to do with us, and it's all your fault, Mrs. Lawrence screamed. I told you I would handle this, Mr. Lawrence said. Face it, I've been in Vegas for 3 years, so you've screwed up things with your son all by yourselves, I said. What's his address? It's your fault he left, Mrs. Lawrence screamed. Quiet down, Mr. Lawrence said. I said I would handle this. Of course it's my fault. I told Gabriel he had a brain and it was time to think for himself, and don't let anybody think for him, I said. What's that supposed to mean? Mrs. Lawrence said. Since you treated him like you treated me, I can see why he left. I'll find Gabriel another way, I said, heading back to my truck. For a bunch of good people, you sure aren't nice. Maybe you should try apologizing. It might get you further than screaming. Sorry to bother you. I won't make that mistake again. I told you to let me handle this, Mr. Lawrence said. What's he mean? Of course we're nice people, Mrs. Lawrence shrieked. We don't need to apologize. We haven't done anything wrong. I guess that's why your son wants nothing to do with you, I said, climbing into my truck. For what it's worth, I don't like you either. It's time you accepted the fact that you screwed up your relationship with your son and with the love he and I shared. I'm glad Gabriel got away from you two. Now he has a chance to grow into his own person. If he ever speaks to you again, tell him I stopped by to see how he's doing. I already know you won't. You're not nice people. I don't understand. We're nice people, aren't we? Mrs. Lawrence said to her husband as I drove off. I found the local station and turned the radio up. Showcase hour, where they previewed new songs by bands nobody had ever heard of. Some new band, Leapfrog, played a slow, soft song that let me think. For such a stupid name, they played good music. Gabriel could be anywhere in this town, or in this state, or even another state. I'd be leaving for Vegas in a few days, so the best I could do is drink to his memory. I stopped by a bar, took a stool, and ordered a beer. My mind played the game of what could have been if things between me and Gabriel had worked out. Maybe it would have turned into something. Maybe it was a high school romance that only lasted a couple of months. We never had a chance to find out. It made me sad. Gabriel, here's to what might have been, I said, and toasted the good times we shared. I went back home. Dad slept in his chair in front of the television. I could have gone to my old room. Dad had sort of preserved it by storing everything else inside. Sleeping on the couch was fine. I snuck the remote from my dad and flipped through random channels until I found some weird cake decorating contest. Dad stirred and slowly stood. Did you find him? I don't think Dad could handle the full story, so I simplified it. Gabriel moved out, and his parents wouldn't tell me his address. Dad nodded. It seemed like he had aged 10 years since this afternoon. I'm sorry. I had hoped. I helped Dad back to his room and found him his sweats and helped him change. When he laid down, he was asleep in an instant. I went back to the television and the couch and Grandma's cookies, peanut butter chocolate chip. The fire made the room too warm, so I stepped out front for some air. The night had grown very dark, and I sat in the porch swing and enjoyed the stillness. Vegas is many things, but it isn't still. It would have been nice to see Gabriel again, but there was little chance of that, maybe even no chance. What we had been good. Dad had some beers in the fridge. I got one, and took a seat back outside. Goodbye, Gabriel, I said, taking a drink and reliving the first time we held hands, or the first time we kissed. I should have gone inside, but the coldness of the night felt good. I'd been sitting on the swing for an hour when a car pulled up in front of the house. I checked my phone. 11. The headlights turned off, and a figure got out. The figure paused a moment, also checked their phone, and hesitantly walked up to the house. Back in the day, Dad would yell at me because I had left the front door wide open, but the screen door was closed. I sat in the shadows. The figure was male, and he approached the door and softly knocked. "Cameron, are you up?" The voice had not changed since the last time we saw each other 4 years ago. "Gabriel, I'm over here," I said. In the flicker of the firelight coming out of the door, Gabriel smiled. His eyes were eager and wide, and the love I had seen in them years ago was still there. He had changed, a little older. His brown hair was worn to his shoulders, and a crisp stubble beard accented his jaw and cheekbones. His eyes smiled, though maybe I imagined it, but they were deeper, more brooding. Gone was the brightness and fun that I remembered, but instead there was a seriousness about him. Even in the dim light, I could trace the face I had fallen in love with, now made adult by years of pain. "You've changed," Gabriel said. "So have you," I said. He took a seat next to me and accidentally touched my hand. I held it. He wore a subtle cologne, and his breath smelled of cinnamon. Gabriel took a breath before speaking. "I'm sorry to hear about your dad. I hope he'll be okay." "Thanks," I said, squeezing his hand. He squeezed mine back. "Whatever you said to Mom made her cry. In a 30-second message, she told me about your dad, apologized, and said you came back to find me," Gabriel said. "I'm glad you did." I let go of Gabriel's hand and wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "You don't know how often I dreamed of this moment." "Nowhere near as much as I did," he said. "Do you have a boyfriend or girlfriend?" I said. "Boyfriend. It didn't work out," Gabriel said. "I'm sorry. I took after you. I'm in college now," I said. "Down in Vegas?" he said. I nodded. He was close. His lips were closer. His hand was warm. His breath was warmer. "Dad is sorry about what happened. I wish things had been different," I whispered. "Me too," he said. We hugged. He held my cheek and stared into my eyes. "Too many years, too much pain," Gabriel said. "Too much," I whispered. I caressed his cheek, held his head, and eased into a kiss. Gabriel kissed me back. There was something desperate and lonely in our kiss. Our lips seemed to pause, and we rested our foreheads together. "I missed you," Gabriel whispered, pulling me close. We breathed together. When our lips met again, they remembered what to do. When we separated again, we whispered and held hands. My breath became ragged. The emotion inside leaked out of my eyes. I tried to smile. I tried not to show any emotion, but I failed. "It's okay. We're together," Gabriel said. We held each other and then leaned side by side and enjoyed this impossible moment. When we got cold, we went inside and sat on the couch, holding hands and talking. We had years to catch up on. Sometime during the night, the crackling of the fire sang us to sleep. "Anybody up?" Grandma yelled at the back door and then walked in the kitchen. "Time for breakfast. Dennis, Cameron, how do you like your eggs?" I woke, and first thing I saw was Gabriel leaning against my shoulder, his eyes bright. When he saw me looking at him, he smiled and whispered, "I can't believe I'm with you." He kissed me, and for the first time in years, some deep part of me was happy. "Is it too late for us?" I whispered. "You're in Vegas. I'm in Montana. That's 12 hours apart," he said. "Cameron, wake up. Do you want your eggs scrambled, sunny side up, or hard-boiled?" Grandma yelled from the kitchen. "Keep your voice down. They're still asleep," Dad said, leaning on the wall and staring at us. A little color had come back into his cheeks. "They? What do you mean, they? What's going on?" Grandma said, and walked up to him and looked into the living room. She looked at both of us, hands on her hips. "Morning," I said. "Morning," Gabriel said. Do you remember my friend Gabriel? Do you mind if he joins us for breakfast? I said, rising and pulling Gabriel to his feet. We were boyfriends a long time ago, Gabriel said, gripping my hand. Maybe we can be again? Or is it too late? I said. Dad walked over and hugged us both. Gabriel, I'm really sorry. It took a heart attack for me to realize how many mistakes I made. I'm glad you and Cameron found each other. My dad was unshaven, weak, unsteady on his feet. And for the first time in my life, he cried. It's okay, Dad, I said, holding both him and Gabriel. I guided Dad to a chair and helped him sit. Gabriel took my hand and a small smile tweaked the corners of his lip. Cameron, it's not too late. I have some vacation time in a month. Why don't I spend it in Vegas? Do you know a place I can stay? Gabriel said. How about my place? I said, and led him into the kitchen. Halloween had arrived, my last night in Montana before I drove back to Vegas. I was chopping wood in the backyard, thinking about everything that had happened. My shirt and wife beater were on the picnic table, plus a tall glass of lemonade. Dad wasn't able to chop wood, and wouldn't be for a while. I had to chop as much as I could before I left. Cameron's out back chopping wood, Dad said, from inside the house. He'd like the company. A few minutes later, Gabriel showed up carrying a couple of wine glasses and a bottle of red wine. What's up? I said, and put the axe down. Trick or treat. I brought treats. It's your last day, and I just came to talk and wish you luck at school, he said, and set the wine and glasses on the table. Dad closed the door, and a moment later the television played a football game and the pink curtains closed. I guess it was Dad's way of giving us some privacy. I came at the right time, Gabriel said. Somebody is shirtless, sweaty, and sexy. I chuckled and took his hand. Let me show you something, I said, and led him to the old apple tree, to the heart we had carved years ago. Gabriel touched the heart and traced the edge of it before tracing the letters. CJ loves GL, he said. Remember the afternoon we carved that? I said. That was the best day I ever had. That makes this the perfect place for something special, he said, and reached into his pocket. He pulled a small cloth bag out of his pocket and weighed it in his hand. What's that? I asked. He dumped the contents of the bag into his hand. 2 chains, each with a gold ring on them. You aren't the only one who wished things were different. Gabriel took one of the chains and put it around my neck. I lifted the ring and looked at it. It's not a proposal or a promise, but a reminder, Gabriel said. We loved each other once, and I think we still do. At least I do. Maybe, in time, if things work out between us, it can become serious. How many people get a second chance? It seemed the right moment, so I lifted his chin and kissed him. Gabriel's eyes remained closed a moment before they opened, and he grinned. I broke open the wine and filled the glasses. 2 second chances. To the future, Gabriel said, and we clicked our glasses together and drank. He took my glass and set both glasses on the table. With an odd smile, Gabriel whipped his shirt off. Now that the serious stuff is said, let's see how much firewood we can chop for your dad. His eyes twinkled like they used to, back when we were secret boyfriends. We pulled close, and this time our kiss held the promise of tomorrow. Cameron, Gabriel, I've made more peanut butter chocolate chip cookies, Grandma yelled. Then she saw us. Never mind, they'll be in the kitchen waiting for you. Gabriel drove down to Vegas when he could, and each break and holiday, I drove up to Montana. It took months as we discovered who each of us had become, and we grew close. Call each other at least once a day, kind of close. Dad had another heart attack nearly a year later and required bypass surgery. I had to postpone college so I could care for my dad. Gabriel stayed by my side and even moved in with us. We didn't know how much longer Dad would be with us. Grandma convinced us that we should hurry. When Dad was stronger, we scheduled a special dinner. We invited friends from high school, neighbors, family, especially a judge, even Gabriel's parents. That night, in front of everyone, we said our vows, took our necklaces off, and wore our rings how they should be worn. Grandma took a special picture of Dad in his tux, with me on one side and Gabriel on the other, all of us smiling. I printed it out and it's displayed in mine and Gabe's apartment in Vegas. My fondest memory of my dad was when he hugged both me and Gabriel right after the photo and said, "I'm proud of you." Growing up, I loved and hated my dad at the same time, but in the end, there was only love. Thanks for joining me, friends. Peace.